Hello, I'm back! And wow, this series has begun to take off. I disconnect for a couple of short weeks only to find out that not only has my Link to the Past video reached 2,000 views, but that we are now 160 subscribers strong. Thank you so much for everything. The reception to this series has been staggering, and all of this good news after a lovely holiday as well. If you're wondering where I've been, well, let me tell you, I spent a blistering 2 weeks on the other side of the Northern Hemisphere in Japan. A faraway land where vending machines are everywhere, public transport doesn't suck, and a full meal is cheaper than a Waitrose sandwich. Everything is so different, so foreign and loud and overwhelmingly unique. And yet, strangely, similar. As someone from an island with an imperial history of its own, there were customs and ideas and moments in exploring the culture that I almost recognised. There were castles and coins and queues from the grand to the mundane, reminding me of home. Echoes of the familiar colliding with the unknown. And of course, if we're talking about the grand, we can't forget the massive mountain at the centre of it all, Mount Fuji, a towering monument of natural splendour standing tall above the landscape, summoning your attention again and again wherever you go. And after such a magical adventure on this strange and beautiful island, all the moments spent with my friends and the new places I'd discovered, it was over, and like it had hardly happened, I was back, returned to my normal life, like it was all just a wonderful dream. Anyway, enough of that rubbish, let's talk about Link's Awakening. The very first handheld Zelda game, and the one I used to be pretty meh on, but after recently replaying it in anticipation for this very video, it's become one of my very favourite games in the series. Now, there was a bit of a problem when planning out this piece, because the Link in this game is meant to be the very same Link from A Link to the Past. As such, he looks pretty much identical, with the only tiny difference being some colour alterations in his hair and his belt. Apart from those tiny tweaks, that's it. So deciding how to set this particular Link apart from his predecessor required a lot of thought. I had to get the brain meat working in my noggin, and the answer came from the game itself. Link's Awakening doesn't really have a signature item in the same way that future games like Ocarina of Time or The Wind Waker do, except it has one item that was introduced in this entry that hasn't really been seen since. It's the first dungeon item you get in the whole game, and one of the most important, Rock's Feather. A feather that allows Link to jump over holes, gaps, enemies and obstacles. He even does a little flip. Pair this with perhaps the most iconic artwork from the game's release and you start to see my vision here. Side note, it's also a subtle callback to the Disney version of Peter Pan, which if you've watched the very first episode, like the good viewer I know you are, you'll recognise the significance of this. Actually, now that I think about it, Koholint Island does kind of feel like its own take on Neverland. Now this was a particularly difficult pose for numerous reasons. For one, it's very tall, which can wreak havoc with the formatting, and two, it requires a good deal of perspective work and anatomical sense. There's always this tug of war between creating a pose with an exciting line of action and retaining the correct proportions. The more you exaggerate a pose, the harder it gets to keep anatomical fidelity. It just takes a lot of experimenting and tweaking to get the right balance. Try not to corral yourself too much with the initial sketches. You want to get the motion and the feeling of the piece down in these sweeping strokes before you then focus in on the details. For me, the feet were really difficult to get right, specifically the shape of the boot. For most of the sketching phase, I had his foot facing down towards the ground, but in the end, I did change it to make it more accurate to the original artwork, and I'm very glad I did. It just looks way better this way. It's always worth putting in that little extra effort with your artwork, because it's those details that bring it all together in the end. The other problem in this piece is the face. Link in this piece has this big beaming grin that, paired with his roundish youthful face, means that you have to be very careful about the fine details. This is going to be a continuous problem throughout the painting, as you'll soon see. But for now, as we transition into painting, let's quickly talk about the game itself. Originally developed as a Game Boy port of A Link to the Past as a little side project by some Nintendo developers, the game was upgraded to its own entry, with series veteran and A Link to the Past director Takashi Tezuka taking command of the project. A lot of the A Link to the Past development team returned to work on this game, and you can tell it plays very similarly to A Link to the Past, with various tweaks to make the gameplay experience even better. Seriously, this game plays extremely well for a 30-year-old Game Boy game. Wait, 30? This game is 30 years old? Oh God! The pacing of this game really has to be commended. Obviously, as a Game Boy game, it can't be an overly expansive adventure, but the way the game quickly guides you from location to location means that you're constantly discovering new areas, new characters, new enemies, new items and mechanics. The path forward can be annoyingly cryptic at times, but so long as you make use of the hint system, you'll be able to find your way fairly easily. In fact, it's probably why I enjoyed it so much more on repeat playthroughs. Having the foreknowledge to navigate the game's foibles essentially unlocks the densest Zelda experience in the series. If you know where you're going, you can breeze through this game in only a few hours, and by doing so, you can better appreciate the story it's trying to tell. One of escapism, doubt, and perseverance even in the face of uncertainty. Which brings us back to the painting. You see, there's a reason why I said this was the one that almost made me quit the series in the last video, because by this point, I was just struggling to make it work. You see, the problem in dealing with realism is that, despite your references being more accessible than other styles, it means that every piece lives or dies by the details, especially in the faces. By trying to push your creation beyond the uncanny valley, it means that if you fall even slightly short, you're stuck with a piece that can be viscerally unpleasant to look at, and that's what happened with Link's face. Drawing a neutral expression is one thing, understanding the human face as a 3D object is another, but when it comes to painting extreme emotions like anger, joy, sadness, or pain, you're not drawing an object, you're communicating a feeling. Even if you can draw what's in front of you, merely depicting a face is a very different thing from making it feel like a living person. I got stuck repainting the same face over and over and over again, trying to capture what worked about the simple details in my sketch, and failing repeatedly. At this point, I was considering whether it was worth it, whether I should just stop, move on to other projects, and forget this side adventure even happened. But then, I took a long break, came back to it after some time away, and quickly found the solution. I simply started the face all over again. I kept to the sketch as much as possible, and while I wouldn't be entirely happy with the face until the very last second, I could at least move on to other parts of the painting. I think what this painting has taught me most of all is that you cannot let one part of your project consume your entire workflow. The discipline of being able to say good enough is one that is essential to a healthy creative process, especially when you know you can go back and polish the rough edges later. And now that the introspection is out of the way, I'd like to talk about a few things that I'm particularly proud of. For one, the folds on his tunic are some of the best that I've painted so far, specifically around his belt and his sleeve. They really help to ground this piece in the sense of tactility. Another highlight is his hair. For whatever reason, all the stars came together to help me achieve the perfect sheen, shape and volume. Look at him, my dude could model for Pan 10. And thirdly, can I just flex for a bit because look at that knee. I really cook with that one, and the thigh? Getting your anatomy right is a special kind of high. I love it. And now with some finishing touches to the sword. You can see I used the Covalent sword instead of his usual one because I just think the design rocks and I haven't been able to paint it yet. Just let me have this, I deserve to have some fun. With everything else done and dusted, finally, the painting is complete. Let's see it. Can I just say, thank God this painting turned out as good as it did. I really struggled with this one, and for all the time and effort that I put into it, I really think it all paid off. I'm really glad that I was able to celebrate this gem of a game with a painting that I can be proud of, and I hope you guys enjoy it too. But we're not quite finished yet. You see, our journey takes us forward in time, 26 years after the game's initial release. Let's set the scene. You're Nintendo, you have this amazing new hybrid console, fresh on the market, your latest Zelda game has been a massive success, and the next installment is still a few years away. How do you placate your ravenous new audience desperate for more games? Well, you re-release your classics, and the next game on the list for the remake treatment was... Come on, you knew I had to make a painting for the remake. It would be a crime if I didn't. Despite the two games being mechanically identical for the most part, they couldn't look any different. The developers at Grezzo really knocked it out of the park, transforming the pixel art of the Game Boy original into this beautiful living diorama. I genuinely think this is one of the best looking games in the series. I adore it. I also wanted to do it now instead of waiting further down the line, because I think a lot of the thoughts I have of the remake are pretty much identical to the thoughts I have of the original game, so I didn't want to repeat myself. Now, the biggest problem was that the conceit of this series was painting all of these different Links in this realistic, detailed style, but the art direction of Link's Awakening HD means that Link already looks very realistic, so what do I bring to the table in this scenario? How do I paint this faithfully while injecting it with something new? My solution came from an unexpected place. You see, a lot of people online at the time of the reveal were bringing up stills of this old animated film called Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, which I think is based on some pagan witchcraft myth about a four-legged demon that can fly. Anyway, there's a character called Hermie the Elf whose design drew particular comparison for its resemblance to Link, and I thought, well, I might as well pull on that thread. Of course, for the actual painting, I'm going to try and keep the proportions identical to the game. I pitched this piece to myself as if I was making the little doll that you play in the game into a real puppet, like you can just reach out and move him around and stuff, so the actual shape and design, pretty much the same. The sketching phase in this case is fairly simple, with the only difficult areas ironically being the simpler aspects like the eyes and the hands. I also want to give his clothes a bit more volume to emulate a thicker woolen material. The painting process is interesting because my usual palette of harsh light and deep shadows actually became a bit of a disadvantage, because in applying that to this character design, you create this uncanny feeling in that creepy horror movie doll sort of way. It's the reason why all the rendered images in the promotional material have this bright day glow effect to make sure he always looks cute and appealing. And by God, does it work. Get this boy a marketable plush. And now it's time for the segment called What Does Ted Think About This Particular Zelda Game? Honestly, Link's Awakening HD is the reason why Link's Awakening is one of my favourite Zelda games. I played it once when it was released, thought it was alright, put it away for like 5 years, came back to it this year in anticipation for this very video, and I had a really fun time. It is a joy to blast through this game. The art style is adorable, the gameplay is smooth as butter, and I adore all the quality of life improvements. Permanently assigning items to buttons is a godsend, truly. And the music? Oh, God damn, this is an amazing soundtrack. The Face Shrine, the Ballad of the Windfish, and Telltale Heights are easily top 10 Zelda tracks for me, let alone all the other remastered songs in this version. It's so delightful. I would love nothing more than to see the original Zelda remastered in a similar style with all of these improvements. Or even the Oracle games, can you imagine? Oh well, maybe in like 2030 or something, who knows with Nintendo, we're still waiting for some goddamn ports. Any day now. It's gonna be the next Direct, I swear. Any second. By this point, all of the colouring and most of the rendering has been finished, and with it being such a short painting process, I decided to indulge myself and add a few more details to go the extra mile. The main ones being these wispy strands of woolen fibres you see if you look closely. I really wanted to move away from the plasticky look of the game and the promotional material, because while that works for the game itself, as a painting it's kind of a boring texture and it's not really my thing. I like when my characters are made of real, tangible materials. You see the same thing in some of my superhero redesigns where instead of using these nonsense space-age materials and designs, I try to ground them in something more recognisable. The joy of painting is that there's a physicality to it, especially in traditional painting where you have the physical canvas as well as the layers of paint on top. Texture is something that I think is lost in a lot of digital art, but for me, one of the joys of traditional painting is working with the texture, letting the imperfections of the medium guide you and contribute to the piece, which is an artsy way of saying that I like when it looks real. With the rough texturing done and a bunch of other small improvements implemented, we arrive at the end of this painting. Shall we see how it looks? I honestly can't tell you which of these two paintings I prefer, because while I think the second one is an overall more interesting image, cleaner, more refined and more appealing, I can't help but appreciate all the time and effort and toil it took to make the first one. But what can I say? Like the games that inspired them, they were labours of love, and I adore them both. And I hope you like them too, as well as this video. Yes, this does mean I am back. No more holidays, no interruptions, hopefully. I'm back and I'm already hard at work in the next video. Once again, we've got 2 new paintings coming, and I'm sure some of you are very excited to get to the big one. Ocarina of Time. However, we're not quite there yet. You see, there are a couple of links that we failed to represent in this series, and these 2 in particular will need a whole video to themselves. Next time, we delve into the dark and forsaken past of Zelda. The faces that Nintendo has tried to bury, but that the roaming eyes of the internet can never forget. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a thumbs up, and if you want to keep up to date on the series, follow me on my Instagram, @TedCurtisArt. I'll see you all next time. Have a good life.